Give me 1 second. Let me know if you're here. Say hi. Um, we are going to be talking about prints again. I feel like there are some topics that are just worth revisiting. And sometimes, first of all, I don't want my YouTube videos to be 6 hours long, but sometimes I finish a video and I think of additional things that I want to say about the topic. So today we're going to be talking about modern versus dated prints again. And I'm going to be showing you, I really struggled this weekend to find words because I see and I try to illustrate through pictures what I see when I'm talking about prints. But I wanted to come up with some words that would describe why some prints are modern and some prints are dated. So for the purposes of this video, we're going to put dated and cheap looking prints in one category and then modern and chic looking prints in another category. Now, the chicness of a print is not always reflected in the price, but is often tied to price. There are some inexpensive brands that do chic prints, but often cheap prints look cheap. So I'm putting dated and cheap together and modern and chic together. Okay, so let's talk. I'm gonna share six things that differentiate. Yay, good to see you guys. 6 things that differentiate modern prints versus dated prints. And then I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show you some pictures. Like, fingers crossed, the technology works for me. So the first thing that differentiates dated and cheap prints from modern and chic prints is the quality and the printing technique. So the quality of both the fabric and then the way that it's printed. Often cheap prints are screen printed or they're heat transfer printed, where they've got that sticky surface on the print. And so the quality of the print, the edges, the sharpness of the prints, the saturation level of the prints is not the same in a cheap print or a dated print as in a modern print. So modern prints use techniques like they use eco-friendly printing and dyes that really look much more sophisticated. They use something called sublimation printing, and they use digital printing, which are more expensive and more sophisticated techniques that really produce a higher quality print. So in addition to the print themselves and the print technique being higher quality, the fabric that it's being printed on is often higher quality and holds the print better. So quality is the first differentiator between a dated and cheap print and a modern and chic print. But really, I'm gonna break down the next few pointers a little bit more, because quality we all know and we can usually all assess good quality versus bad quality. The rest of these are a little bit harder to figure out. The second thing that differentiates a dated print from a modern print is the complexity and creativity of the design. So how complex, how intricate, how abstract, how bold, how interesting is the design? Is the pattern repetitive or non-repetitive? So modern prints have creative, like abstract, asymmetrical, even mixed media designs, often very detailed with multiple layers. They have subtle gradients in the color. They're very artistic. They often feature like geometrical patterns or digital artwork. You'll see some of these examples, photorealism, but the prints that are really modern and elevated have intricate or bold or abstract designs. They also have patterns that are non-repetitive and are often random on the fabric. They're placed on the fabric strategically and it's not just a repetitive pattern where you see the same thing over and over. So it looks more fluid, it looks more organic. Now, dated prints often have simplistic and repetitive designs. They tend to be a little bit more predictable, a little less innovative. They have like very simple motifs, like very simple florals or repetitive paisley patterns, or overly symmetrical designs, and they just don't look as sophisticated. They often lack the complexity, and they don't have the same artistic qualities that modern prints have. They also can look really busy and cluttered. So dated designs can appear like overly detailed but no balance. They often put too much. I talk about this all the time. But wait, there's more. They often pack too many details into the print, which makes it look visually overwhelming and cluttered and busy and not modern. Okay, the third thing we want to talk about with prints is color palettes and combinations. So this is one of the things that I think is easiest to spot. The cheap, dated color palettes versus the modern and chic color palettes. So modern prints often have either vibrant prints, muted prints, or they often have unexpected combinations with lots of variety in the color palette that they're using. So it's not all bright or all dull often. They have variety. They've got like sophisticated color combinations. They have vibrant colors or they have muted color. And it's like a wide range of colors, often in the same item. They also will do unexpected color combinations. They'll like mix brights with neutrals, or they create different depths in the colors featuring using toning and gradients and shading. They also will have often richer and more elegant colors, more subtle colors. They focus on harmony or contrast that enhances the overall design of the item. So it's not just bright for the sake of being bright or washed out. The colors add something to the design of the piece of clothing. Okay, now dated prints, muted colors, like washed out colors, faded colors with no complexity, no subtle shading, no depth, or garish colors, like over the top bright colors that look like they were plucked out of the 1980s, but with no modern references to them. They also often lack depth. You don't see the subtle shading, you don't see the depth in those prints, so they feel flat and one-dimensional. Okay, next point, print placement and scale. So modern prints and especially elegant and more expensive prints often use the placement of the print is very strategic and very intentional. So artistic placement of the print, they use a print to enhance the shape and the style of the item of clothing. So prints can be positioned maybe asymmetrically or in specific areas to draw attention to the specific parts of the body to create flattery. They're just very intentional about print placement. They look at the overall silhouette and then the print is placed on the item accordingly. And they kind of flow seamlessly into the garment. They also feature prints that vary in scale. So often the prints have big details mixed with smaller details. And so you've got some visual contrast there that's really visually pleasing. Now, dated prints often feature all over prints that are poorly placed on the garment. We've all seen this where the print is like in an unfortunate place on the item of clothing and it just doesn't look right. They can cover the entire garment in a uniform way. It looks just kind of boring. Doesn't take into account the shape and style of the item. It really can make the clothing look a little bit monotonous and predictable. I'm going to show you a couple of examples of all of these. The other thing about print placement is often in inexpensive items. We've all seen this where the prints don't line up on the side, right? They don't meet on the side, which I think is inexcusable. Okay, so fashion relevance and timelessness is the next thing that differentiates modern prints from dated prints. So modern prints are in line with current trends. Now, I've often talked about going on the Nordstrom site, filtering by contemporary brands, and talking about what, or looking at what what the contemporary brands are showing. But honestly, if you go on a site like Revolve, where everything on the site is contemporary, and just scroll through Revolve for 10 or 15 minutes, you're not going to wear most of those clothes because most of those clothes are aimed at 20-year-olds. I mean, some of them are amazing, but that's not the point. The point is to really kind of like adjust our eye and train our eye to what's modern. So if we look at what's modern, we're going to be able to see the trends that modern brands are showing. So modern prints are either in line with current trends or they're classic with a modern twist, right? Whereas dated prints often rely on past trends a little too heavily without any kind of update. So maybe it makes a reference to the 70s or 80s or 90s, but it's just too literal and not at all modern, or they're not timeless at all. They're dated classics. Finally, the last point that differentiates modern versus dated prints is their cultural and artistic influences. So if you look at like a brand like Farm Rio really drawing on lots of different ethnicities, that's what makes their patterns like rich and vibrant and interesting, whereas you won't see most really cheap or really dated brands with those types of influences. They're not as artistic, they're not drawing on as many different cultures and as many different influences, and so their designs tend to be a little flatter. Okay, now that I've covered those tips, those are the 6 things that I want you to look for, and I'll recap them. I'll try to recap them at the end, but now I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show you. We're going to start by looking at some modern prints, and I'm going to tell you what makes these prints modern, and then I'm going to look at some dated prints and tell you what makes these prints dated. Okay, so okay, first set of prints. This first dress from Farm Rio, what makes this a modern print? So it's got a very intricate pattern, like very intricate pattern that reflects cultural influences. Like it reflects, you know, the current trend for featuring different cultures. It's also noticed that the pattern placement is really interesting. So they've got different patterns on the tiers than they do on the actual body of the dress. And it's also got mixed media, like it's got embroidery, it's got detail on it that if you look close on that dress, it's obvious it's an expensive and elevated item. So the mix of patterns, the mix of details, the mix of media, and the cultural influences, the artistic nature of the print, the color palette, all lend itself to being a more modern print. Now, this middle print, this is like the color palette here is very, very sophisticated. You can see the subtle great gradations in pattern shading and depth. Like it's not one note. It's really subtle and rich and beautiful. It's got a very sophisticated color scheme, a very harmonious color palette. And then you see a little bit of a contrast in scale of the flowers. So the small flowers and the larger flowers, you're seeing a little bit more of a contrast in the scale between the large and the small flowers that make it look more interesting and more visually pleasing. So that's a dress from Anthropologie. Okay, third item, that's from Zimmermann. Now you can see, I don't have to tell you, but I'm sure all of you can see the interesting pattern placement on this dress. First of all, this is just spectacular. I don't think anyone would look at that and not know that that's an expensive dress. And unfortunately, it is quite an expensive dress, but it's got a very intricate pattern and it's a random pattern. So you're not seeing the pattern repeated exactly all over the garment. It's not boring. It's a very intricate and detailed design. It's very elegant and subtle and subdued, but really it's the pattern placement that makes this just shine. Like they've got the pattern across the front of the skirt. That's a very intentional pattern placement. It's aligned perfectly. Now, whether any of these items are your taste or not, I'm encouraging you to kind of look at the details that elevate these items. So the pattern placement is very intentional. You can even see the button placket and how the pattern is placed there. You can see again the pattern across the front of the legs. Very, very intentional, very artistic, and the pattern was designed to complement the item of clothing. So it's not random. They didn't say, oh, let's make this dress and then let's put it in 23 patterns and hopefully it'll work on all of them. The pattern and the shape of the garment were designed together, right? So I hope that you guys can see what I saw in these items. Okay, next set of pictures. This is this first dress is from Alice and Olivia. This is a digital print. It's photorealistic. It's not screen printed. It's digitally printed. Again, this is a much more expensive printing technique. This doesn't have to be your style, but I want you to see what differentiates these good prints from these bad prints. The second one is, this is actually not my favorite print. The second one, this is from Dion von Furstenberg. She's known for fabulous signature prints. So again, a print doesn't have to be your style for you to see the quality in it, but this print is randomized and not repetitive, and it's placed very strategically on the garment. So you can, if you look at this print, you do not see the same motif show up again and again and again in this pattern. So a randomized print like this is one of the keys of a modern and chic print. Finally, that last item from Issey Miyake, this is a statement, subtly blended print. This is the plissé, like pleated fabric, which right away elevates it, but it's a really subtly blended print with lots of rich colors and then some strategic pops. It's just a very elegant color palette that looks more sophisticated. Okay, now let's move on to some dated prints so we can kind of see the difference between what works and what doesn't work, right? Okay, so what's wrong with this first one? It's not awful. It's not awful. The other two are awful. This first one is not awful, but it looks a little dull and faded. If you look at the print up close, it lacks subtle shading and depth. And it's a simplistic, repetitive print. You can see the same exact flower. You can see the same exact motif across the print. It's, again, this is not bad. It's just boring. It feels very flat and one-dimensional and a little blah, right? So if you compare that to the beautiful Anthropology one of a similar style with the rich colors, you can see that this looks a little bit cheaper, a little bit more boring. Again, not awful, but not, it's a very simplistic, repetitive, kind of dull and muted print, right? This middle one, however, is awful. This is garish. So this is a bad use of bold color. Now you saw some good uses of bold color, like in the Farm Rio and in the Issey Miyake. This is a bad use of bold color. It kind of references the 80s without any attempt at modernizing. It's just so bad. It's also a stamped on print, not a high quality print. Chances are the print is going to fade quickly. It's going to look cheap really quickly. But really, I'm talking here about the actual look of the print, and it just looks very garish. There's a lot going on, and then you've got this print on a dress that's like it's a bad print on a not so fabulous dress silhouette. And so the combination, which we're always looking at the combination of the print and the item and how they align with each other or don't, it just is, it falls really, really flat and it looks like a dated dress. Okay, the third print, this is an example of one of the reasons cheap and dated prints can often look so boring. So it is a very monotonous pattern. It's just, the pattern is repeated across the whole garment. It's in a very uniform scale across the shirt. And it just looks monotonous and predictable and just a little boring. This is boring, bordering on really bad, don't wear it. Whereas the other one was bordering on just a little bit boring, but not offensive. This one really, this shirt really offends me. It really offends my sensibilities. Okay, let's look at the next slide. Okay, so we're gonna start with this first dress. This is faded, boring, lacks depth and variety. Is it awful? No, it's not awful. But it's just a little, and I hope that you can see after seeing some of the other prints how this is a little faded, a little boring. And you're not seeing interesting uses or placement of the fabric. And if we're going to go back over the list again, we're not seeing an interesting placement of the print. We're not seeing an interesting variety in the color palette. We're not seeing an interesting range of scale in the pattern. It just kind of looks all the same. This next dress, so often dated prints cover the entire garment in a uniform way, the way that this is, the way that actually all of these items do, without any consideration to how the pattern impacts the garment's shape or style. So it looks less polished and it looks a little too busy. So again, this isn't a bad one. It's not awful. It's just not that interesting. And this is my advice always. If a print doesn't add something to an item, skip it and make it a solid. A solid will look better than a ho-hum print. So if you're going to choose a print, you want a print that is really intentional, that you chose because you love, and that is elevated and that it's really reflective of your personal style. And none of these prints are going to do that. The final item is just awful. So it's garish, it's busy, it's a cluttered print. It's It doesn't have any interesting artistic or cultural references to it. And notice it's only printed on one side, which is often a sign of a less expensive item. Again, not the end of the world. What does make this the end of the world is the print itself. The print is just, it's just not fabulous. Okay, so I'm going to show you some more good versus bad in a couple of different categories of prints. So this, you can see the saturation level of this first print, which is a modern, elevated, really elegant and high quality print. You can see the crispness of the pattern, the richness and the sophistication of the color palette, and then how the print works on the dress. Now, the dress on the right, I hope I don't have to tell you that the dress on the right is not going to do anyone any favors. This, you know, maybe as a bathing suit cover up, or you're wearing it on the boat or something, but it's not a sophisticated print. It doesn't feature a sophisticated color palette. The way that the print itself is drawn onto the garment looks cheaply made. And then, of course, the style of the dress, you know, it's just not that elevated. So again, it's a combination often of the print and the item. Let's look at this next one. Now, this is the difference between bold done right and bold done badly. Now, the one on the left is busy and cluttered, and it's just not like, I hope that you can see how this is just a messy looking print. There's just too much going on. This is a, but wait, there's more print. But there isn't really an attempt at it being really over, like artistic. It's just kind of, and again, if you spent some time on Revolve or one of those websites, you would see that this is something that, let me know, comment please, and let me know. It just occurred to me. I'm wondering if you guys can see what I can see. Let me know if you can see me clearly and you can see everything I'm sharing. Okay. Yeah, please comment and let me know if you're seeing these prints before because I just realized I've been going on for a while. Okay, so I think you are seeing them. Awesome. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. Just had a moment where I was like, what if they can't see the pictures? Okay, so this is the second print. You can tell is very artistic. It's done by an artist. Awesome, thank you. It's done by an artist. You can really see the intricacy and the detail, and you can see that the pattern is placed really strategically on the item of clothing, right? Let me know, you guys, if you can see the difference between this dated print and this modern print. Awesome. And if I'm communicating that clearly. Okay, let's look at this next one. Here we're looking at a very intricate print versus a kind of basic print, a detailed print with a lot going on. Again, observe the pattern placement on that print. There's a detail at the bottom. The print is placed strategically on the item of clothing, right? Whereas the other one is fine. It's okay. It's just a floral, but it's just kind of boring, right? So it's not an intricate print. It's a very simplistic and repetitive print. Whereas the one on the left is a more intricate and less repetitive print. So let me know if you guys can see that, see it in terms of if that illustration makes sense to you. Okay, now I'm going to show you examples of a really repetitive print on the right, and on the left, a less repetitive print. Now, on the left, it's a very artistic print, and it's again placed strategically on the item of clothing, and you don't see the same motif show up again and again. But if you look at the dress on the right, which is really not good, with the circles on it, you can see that same circle motif show up repeatedly throughout the item. You can see it show up again and again. So you're seeing the same. Awesome. So glad you guys can see the difference. You're seeing the same motif show up again and again on the item on the right. On the left, it's strategically placed and very artistically done. If you took these patterns and you took them off the dresses and you looked at them side by side, I believe you would see that one is really artistic and creative and looks more elevated, and the other is a little bit more basic and a little bit more boring. So the print on their own are different, the prints on their own, but the prints added to the dresses, it really highlights why one print is better quality than the other print. Okay, let's look at the next. So these are florals. Now, this floral on the left from Zimmerman, the quality of the actual, like it looks like an impressionist painting on that dress. It is such a stunning pattern. Notice the subtleties in that pattern, all the subtle color gradations in that pattern, the mix of scale of large florals and small florals, the wide color palette where you've got a little bit of a pop of like a deeper, richer color, and then some softer colors. There's just, and then of course the placement of the pattern on the dress. So there is just so much intricacy and detail and artistic design in the pattern on the left. Compare it to the dress on the right. So they did focus a little bit on on pattern placement in the dress on the right, but the pattern is all very one note. It's all bright. It's all one dimensional. It's repetitive. It's a little boring. It's a little predictable. It's, you know, it is what it is. Like, it's not the most exciting print. So you can see the difference, I think, between the quality and the detail of the dress on the left versus the dress on the right. Okay. Another example of florals. The dress on the left, it looks like those flowers were just stamped on. They're repetitive. They show up again and again. Yay, I'm so glad you guys are getting the concept. Can you see the difference between the floral on the left and the floral on the right? Like, it is so much richer on the right. So you've got these subtle colors that are blending together. You've got a beautiful artistic print that is placed really strategically on the dress. On the left, you've got like 3 colors that the flowers are stamped on. And it's just a very basic floral. It's also an unattractive floral in my opinion, but it's very, very basic. It's very boring. It's like, again, it's like a kid playing with a stamp pad, and they took stamps and they just put it wherever there was room. There is no subtle gradation in color. The colors all look the same. They, you know, the pattern itself is not elevated or artistic. It looks a little bit almost juvenile, in my opinion. So I hope that these 2 floral dresses side by side, florals are hard. I love florals and I love pattern, but this is why I keep leaning into prints, because I don't want anybody to say, I'm never going to wear a print again. If you love prints like I love prints, I want you to be able to pick them well so that you can wear them and love them. Okay. Here I have the Farm Rio dress next to that. I want you to see it again, that really bold, because I want you to see again the difference between bold done well and bold done badly, right? Bold done well, that is artistic. An artist designed that print. It's got mixed media. It's got beautiful pattern placement. It's got interesting and elevated details. Bold done badly on the right. It's an 80s inspired print. Yay, good to see you guys. It's an 80s inspired print that's stamped on an inexpensive fabric on an unflattering dress shape that is not modern or current. Okay, I think that's it for my slides. Yes. Okay, I hope that this was helpful. And I would love to hear and continue the conversation about prints. Definitely let me know in the questions, in the comment section, what your questions are about prints. I hope that this illustration and these visuals, like side-by-side images, really helped you, because I promise you, I am not gatekeeping. I am really trying to illustrate prints for you. It's just something that I think you have to train your eye to see, and something that I kind of see intuitively. So I was trying to find the words to help you when you're shopping, so that you have a checklist of things that you're looking for in prints, so that you can decide if a print is worth investing in or whether you're just going to choose a solid in that item instead. So I'm going to recap really quickly the 6 things you're looking for when you're trying to identify the difference between modern versus dated prints. I'm sorry this one is a little bit longer. The first is quality. The quality of the printing itself, and then the quality of the fabric that it's on. The second is the complexity and creativity of the design. The third is the color palette and the color combinations. The fourth is print placement and scale. The fifth is the relevance to what's happening in fashion right now, or the timelessness. So modern prints are either trendy and have relevance to what's happening in fashion, or they're timeless with a modern update, a modern twist. And then finally, cultural and artistic influences. Are you seeing like it look really artistic? Is it drawing from a wide range of influences, or is it looking really, really flat? So I hope that you guys found this helpful. Again, definitely let's continue this conversation about prints in the comments. Love you guys. Thank you so much for sticking around for this longer Monday morning style session. And I will see you. There is a link to the print catalog that has all of these images in it. And I just wrote the word no under the bad prints so you can identify the good and bad ones, and you can take a closer look at them for yourself. Love you guys. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.